Why was a hardened Navy SEAL commander saluting a woman everyone thought was just a clerk? The question froze the entire base that day. But before that salute, before the silence, she was invisible, almost too invisible. Emma Steele, Private First Class, 28 years old, Logistics Division, Camp Hawthorne, Djibouti. She was a ghost in broad daylight, the kind of soldier whose boots were always polished, whose reports were flawless, whose voice never raised above what was necessary. She carried no weapon in public, had no trident on her chest, and no combat patch stitched across her sleeve. To most, she was a clerk, a supply hand, forgettable. But she carried one thing that made her unforgettable, at least to those who knew: a butterfly, black-inked, wings outstretched on the inside of her forearm. No one took it seriously. At chow, someone muttered about it. What's she gonna do? Flutter at the enemy? Laughter followed, sharp, cruel. Emma heard, she always heard, she just never responded. That was her strength, silence. The sun baked Camp Hawthorne into a furnace every morning. The air shimmered above the tarmac, Humvees groaned under the weight of heat, and Marines barked cadence into the haze. It was a world where noise equaled power, where presence was measured by volume, and where silence was misread as weakness. That's why Emma moved unseen, because she didn't play the game of noise. Until Tuesday. The convoy rolled in at noon, darker than the sun should have allowed. 6 vehicles, blackout tinted, armor heavy. They parked with the predatory calm of wolves circling a flock. The base quieted just slightly as 6 men stepped out. Tier 1 types. Faces weathered, eyes harder than stone, bodies cut by years of battle. They didn't need to announce who they were, their presence announced it for them. Emma stood at the rear supply desk, clipboard ready, forms signed, crates stacked, her posture perfect, her eyes steady. The first man approached, beard heavy, smirk already forming. He looked her over like she was a joke. "You the clerk?" he asked, letting the word linger. "I'm the logistics officer of record," she said, calm. He smirked wider. "Didn't ask for your resume, butterfly." The word stung, not because of what he meant, but because of what he didn't know. She didn't react, didn't flinch. Handed over the crate, tagged, sealed. Her silence wasn't submission, it was control. Another operator chuckled. "Seen more muscle on a Starbucks barista." The others laughed. Their voices filled the warehouse. Emma stood still, clipboard against her chest, breathing slow. She'd heard it all before, she expected it. But then the last man stepped forward. He was older, white hair at his temples, eyes like scorched iron. His uniform looked worn, lived in, not polished. But the way he carried himself, the way silence bent around him, he was their commander. And when he saw her tattoo, he stopped. The laughter died instantly. For a moment the entire air of the warehouse shifted. He froze, blinked once, then straightened. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand, a salute, formal, perfect. The other men stared, confused. One of them whispered, "Sir." But the commander didn't break his gaze, didn't lower his hand. Emma hesitated, her breath caught. For a flicker of a second, the ghost of a memory flashed across her face, something buried, something unspoken. Then she returned the salute, crisp and exact. The warehouse was silent now, completely silent. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" the commander asked. His voice was low, reverent. Emma nodded once. He leaned closer, just enough for her to hear. 4 words. "You were at Velasquez." The entire room shifted again, muscles tensed, eyes widened. The butterfly tattoo wasn't just decoration anymore. It was recognition, a coded symbol, a ghost from an operation no one was supposed to mention. Velasquez, the Black Mission. 5 years ago, 23 operatives gone, presumed dead. The kind of mission erased from official records but whispered about in certain corners. Ghost protocol. Emma Steele was one of them. The young operator who had laughed at her now swallowed hard. How are you still active?" he asked, voice stripped of sarcasm. But Emma didn't answer. She didn't explain. She turned, walked back into the warehouse shadows and vanished as if she had never been there at all. The commander lowered his salute slowly. His men looked at him, waiting for answers. "She's not just active," he muttered, his eyes still on the door Emma had disappeared through. "She's the reason we're alive." The men didn't laugh anymore. That night the base whispered, whispers of Velasquez, of Ember codes, of a private clerk who wasn't supposed to exist. Some said she was lying. Others said the commander's salute was proof enough. By morning, the whispers had turned hostile. Someone printed a blurry photo of her tattoo and taped it on the chow hall wall with one word scrawled across it in red: poser. A group of recruits laughed loud enough for her to hear. Emma didn't flinch. She walked the line, collected her food, sat alone at the edge of the hall, back straight, eyes on the wall, silence again. But silence can't protect forever. Two officers entered, laughing, mocking. Lieutenant Sandville, Major Rikers, both loud, both cruel. They saw the photo, smirked, and made their jokes. "Looks like her tattoo has more clearance than her IQ," Sandville said, and laughter rippled through the hall. Emma placed her fork down slowly, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. Rikers stepped closer, pointing at the photo. "This you," his voice echoed across the room. She didn't respond. "You think wearing that emblem makes you a ghost," he pressed, "makes you one of them." Still silence. Sandville leaned closer. "Let me guess, your boyfriend was a SEAL. You stole it from his jacket while he slept." Emma finally looked up. Her voice was flat, calm. "No," she paused, "but my co wore it on his chest the day we breached a compound in Nuristan. I was third in." The laughter died instantly. Rikers froze. "What did you just say?" Emma stood, straightened her back, her tray untouched. "You've had your laugh. Now let me speak with someone who knows what that emblem means." And for the first time since her arrival, she didn't avoid attention. She walked down the middle of the mess hall, boots striking the tile like a drumbeat. Every soldier's fork paused midair. Every whisper stopped. Emma didn't break stride until she reached the operations office. Knocked once. A voice inside said, "Enter." She opened the door. And the entire base would never look at her the same way again. Why would a decorated colonel rise from behind his desk and salute a private? The answer began the moment Emma Steele stepped through his office door. Colonel Dean Marcus was known across Camp Hawthorne for two things: his iron discipline and his disdain for interruptions. No one walked into his office without a reason. No one. Yet when Emma entered, posture perfect, eyes clear, silence pressing in behind her, Marcus looked up and felt something shift. "Private Steele," he said, his voice measured, "state your business." She reached into her pocket and unfolded a paper worn soft by years of being carried. She laid it on his desk, then stepped back. Her face revealed nothing. Her hands were steady. Marcus frowned, leaned forward, and read. His lips pressed into a line. He read again, then a third time slower. The first line was stamped, "Operation Harrogate Redacted." Below it, operative code, Ember 2, Tier 1 designated marksman, commanding officer, CDR Declan Hoy, SEAL Team 6. Marcus froze. The air between them felt heavier. His eyes lifted, searching Emma's face. She gave him nothing, only silence. This can't be right," Marcus muttered, but his voice was quieter now, carrying an edge of disbelief rather than command. Emma pulled back her sleeve. The butterfly ink stretched into something darker, a black star encircled with coordinates. The full Ember sigil. "That mark," Marcus whispered, his throat tightened. "Only two operatives had it." Emma's voice didn't waver. "The others are buried in Arlington." The colonel pushed back from his desk slowly, almost reverently. He walked around until he stood in front of her. Then, without hesitation, he saluted. And through the open door, half a dozen soldiers passing in the hall saw it happen. A colonel decorated in hard as steel, saluting a private. The base didn't understand what they had witnessed, but they understood enough to know the world had shifted. Emma returned the salute, crisp, precise. No words, no emotion. She turned and walked out. And when she stepped back into the mess hall, silence followed her like a shadow. Sandville and Rikers, who had mocked her minutes earlier, stood stiff near the coffee urn, eyes fixed downward, faces drained of color. Soldiers who had once laughed at her now sat frozen mid-bite, watching her pass. The photo of her tattoo, taped on the wall with the word poser, was gone, torn down. The silence she carried was louder than every insult they had thrown at her. By noon, the whispers spread like a virus. Emma Steele was Ember Two. The Ember emblem wasn't a decoration. It was black class clearance, the kind of thing stored 6 floors under the Pentagon in vaults guarded day and night. Nobody on base could confirm it, but no one dared deny it either, not after seeing Colonel Marcus stand for her. But silence cuts both ways. For every soldier who now looked at her with awe, another looked at her with suspicion. Major Rikers stormed into Marcus's office that afternoon. "She's bluffing, sir," he snapped, anger masking fear. "Some tattoo and a dusty piece of paper don't make her Tier 1. That Operation Harrogate, it doesn't even exist in our records." Marcus didn't look up. "That's because you don't have the clearance." Rikers clenched his jaw. "I'm a major, 23 years, SEAL team, direct action across 3 theaters." Marcus's voice sharpened. "Sit down." Rikers obeyed, reluctant. Marcus turned the file around, tapping the page. "This isn't a bluff. That emblem on her arm, it's an Ember sigil, black class. Her record isn't stored in your system. It's locked below the Pentagon, encrypted across 3 layers you'll never see." Rikers paled, his voice faltered. I've only seen that mark once before." "So have I," Marcus said, his tone softer now. "On Declan Hoy, the man who died saving 5 of ours in Nuristan." He looked up, his eyes hard. "And the one who dragged 2 of them out under fire was Ember Two. Guess who that was?" Rikers had no answer. Marcus leaned in. "You mocked a ghost, Major, and she saluted you." Outside the command chain, Emma became the center of a storm she never asked for. Soldiers who had once ignored her now watched every move. Some offered awkward apologies. Others kept their distance, as if she carried a shadow too heavy to step into. But Emma remained the same, boots polished, reports precise, eyes forward, silent. She hadn't been trained for recognition. She had been trained for the moment no one expected. Still, the base wouldn't let her be invisible anymore. The next morning, the thunder of rotor blades cut across the dawn. A Black Hawk descended on the landing pad. Out stepped General Kavanaugh, his presence bending the air as much as the heat did. He didn't wait for the welcome line. He marched straight into Marcus's office. Within 5 minutes, Emma was summoned. She entered, posture perfect, uniform sharp. She didn't glance at the general's medals nor at Marcus's worried expression. She stood at attention, silent, waiting. The general studied her for a long moment. His voice was low when he spoke. "You're Steele." "Yes, sir." He held up the Ember clearance paper. "Do you know what this means?" "I do." "Then you also know the kind of trouble it brings when it surfaces." Emma nodded once. "I didn't reveal anything. They mocked the tattoo. I didn't explain it until I was cornered." The general's jaw worked. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "The salute," he muttered. "That wasn't mine to control," Emma said. "I followed protocol, they didn't." Silence hung heavy. Finally, Kavanaugh set the paper down. His voice softened, almost breaking through the sternness of command. "Declan Hoy trusted you," he said. "He signed this clearance himself. You saved 2 of my men that night." Emma's face didn't change, but her chest tightened. She remembered the compound, the fire, the shouts, the sound of steel tearing and men dying. She remembered Hoy's last words, words she had carried but never spoken aloud. She blinked once, steady, calm. "Yes, sir." Kavanaugh turned to Marcus. "She stays. full access reinstated, and let the base know no one mocks her again. Then he turned back to Emma. You may not wear a trident steel, but you were deeper in the black than any of them. Don't ever forget that. I haven't, she said quietly. The general gave a single nod and left the room. By that afternoon, Camp Hawthorne had changed. The butterfly tattoo was no longer a joke. It was legend. Soldiers saluted her first now, awkward and unsure but sincere. No one whispered poser anymore. Instead, they whispered something else, something half in awe, half in fear. That's steel. But Emma remained unchanged. She returned to her post at the southern checkpoint, rifle at her side, eyes on the horizon, calm, alone, unmoved by stares, because she had never been there for recognition. She was there for one reason only, to act in the moment when no one else expected. And that moment was coming. The sirens would tell the story soon. What happens when the only eyes open on a sleeping base belong to the soldier no one expected. It was 4:20 hours when the first boom split the sky. A dull, heavy concussion that shook the barracks and rattled the mess hall windows. Emma Steele was already awake. She always woke before dawn, long before the base stirred. She stood at the southernmost checkpoint, her rifle cradled but relaxed, breath steady in the cool pre-morning dark. Some said she never slept at all, just drifted between silence and stillness, like a ghost haunting her own body. The second boom followed, louder, closer. The radios crackled to life. Voices clipped, frantic. Possible breach northern perimeter. No visual, repeat, no visual. Unidentified inbound. Birds in the air, wait, radar's blind, sir. I'm telling you, radar, not seeing them. How the hell? Then everything went black. Every light along the eastern grid winked out. Street lamps, barracks, floodlights, dead. The comms cut to static. The monitors inside command froze mid-scan, green lines frozen across dead screens. An EMP. Emma didn't move. Her post, checkpoint Echo, southern edge of the base, ran on a hardened circuit. Old tech, buried cables. The one place still lit when everything else was swallowed by dark. She lowered her earpiece, now hissing useless static. Slowly she adjusted her grip on her rifle, not tight, not panicked, just ready. Her eyes swept the horizon. The desert stretched quiet and endless. For a heartbeat, nothing stirred, and then she saw it. Movement low, wrong. 4 figures detached themselves from the night. They dropped from a low, silent chopper that hovered just beyond radar range. They moved fast, almost weightless, boots barely whispering against the sand. No call signs, no flags, no lights. Intruders. Emma exhaled once, steadying herself. She pressed the silent alarm on her belt, the hardwired backup no one else even remembered existed. Nothing. The line was dead. So it was her, alone. Her fingers flicked the safety off her M4. Her breath slowed. Her heart did not race. The first figure reached the fence. With practiced ease, he sliced through the wire like it was paper. He slipped inside. Emma fired once. A single shot, precise and muffled by the pre-dawn haze. He dropped instantly, collapsing without sound. 3 left. They hesitated, startled. The hesitation lasted only seconds, but seconds were enough. Emma shifted low behind a concrete barricade, steady and unseen. The second intruder hurled a flashbang. It clattered across the sand. Emma closed her eyes, turned her head, counted 1, 2, 3. The blast erupted white and hot, but she was already moving, already adjusting. She rose and fired, 2 sharp bursts. One target spun sideways into the dirt. Another cried out, crawling, half hidden in the shadows. 2 down, 1 crawling, 1 still moving. The last man bolted toward the secondary tower, trying to cut deeper into the base. Emma vaulted the barricade, low, fluid, silent, not like an infantry grunt, not like a clerk, but like something sharper, something honed in the shadows of missions that never made it to paper. Velasquez lived in her movements. By the time the intruder reached the tower, Emma was behind him. "On your knees." Her voice was calm, commanding. He froze, weapon half raised, turned slowly. His eyes flickered recognition, but he was too late. The shot was clean, muffled, exact. He collapsed. The desert was still again, 5 bodies on the sand, 1 woman standing. Only then did backup arrive. The rumble of APCs shook the ground. Soldiers spilled out, shouting, confused, eyes wide in the dark. Colonel Marcus was among the first on foot, sidearm drawn. His boots ground against sand and blood as he stopped at the sight. 5 intruders sprawled in silence, and 1 woman, Private Emma Steele, standing alone at the checkpoint. "Report," Marcus barked. Emma's voice was steady. "They bypassed radar, EMP drone over northern sector, landed south, neutralized." "You did this?" Marcus asked, eyes scanning the scene, his voice sharp with disbelief. She nodded once, no time to wait. General Kavanaugh arrived seconds later, his face pale, his chest heaving. He stopped cold at the sight of the fallen intruders. His eyes dropped to Emma's arm, the tattoo visible in the dim light. "That tattoo," he whispered. "It wasn't a warning, it was a seal." The words carried weight. By sunrise, the story had already spread. 5 Black Ops infiltrators, neutralized before the base could even mobilize, alone, at Checkpoint Echo. The official debrief would confirm later what Emma already knew: they weren't amateurs. They weren't random insurgents. They were rogue paramilitary, testing vulnerabilities, probing U.S. installations for weak points. They'd chosen stealth. They'd chosen surprise. But they hadn't expected her. In the hours that followed, medals were offered, promotions whispered, clearance reinstated, papers drawn, but Emma refused most of it. She accepted only one thing: her post, the southern checkpoint, the place everyone forgot until it was almost too late. And when soldiers passed her now, they didn't laugh. They didn't whisper "poser." They saluted, some awkwardly, some reverently. But Emma, she didn't always salute back, because she hadn't been there for recognition. She had been there for silence, for stillness, for the one moment no one else was ready to face. The moment that came before dawn. Why would someone refuse the medals others fought their entire careers to earn? The morning after the attack, Camp Hawthorne woke different. The air felt heavier. Even the desert heat seemed quieter, as if the sand itself knew what had happened. Soldiers moved slower, voices hushed, glances sharp. The southern checkpoint was no longer a forgotten corner of the base. It was a shrine, the place where 5 intruders fell, the place where 1 woman stood when everyone else was asleep. By mid-morning, whispers carried across every barracks. She dropped them all, 5 of them alone. Marcus said they bypassed radar. How? Some whispered in awe, others in suspicion, but no one whispered Clerk anymore. In the command building, intelligence officers swarmed over fragments of data. The EMP drone that blinded radar, the silent chopper that disappeared as fast as it came, the bodies stripped of insignia, scrubbed clean of IDs, ghosts against a ghost. But they hadn't been expecting resistance. Not there, not then, and certainly not from her. Colonel Marcus stood at the edge of the operations table, hands braced against metal, eyes fixed on the map. His jaw was tight, but beneath the steel there was something else. A question he didn't ask out loud. How many more times had she done this before anyone noticed? General Kavanaugh was less subtle. He strode into the room, medals catching the morning sun, voice low but sharp. "Who else knows about this?" Marcus didn't lift his eyes. The base saw her bring them in. Half the soldiers are whispering already. We can't put that silence back in the box. The general cursed under his breath. She's Ember Two. That sigil on her arm isn't decoration. It's clearance deeper than half the men here will ever dream of, but she doesn't want to be seen. Marcus finally looked up. Maybe that's why she survived. While they argued, Emma returned to her post. Same uniform, same rifle, same silent watch on the horizon. She hadn't asked for recognition. She hadn't asked for medals or promotions. The offer came anyway. An officer delivered the papers to her desk. Commendation, a Bronze Star nomination, a recommendation for reactivation into special operations with honors. Emma didn't even look at them. She slid the papers back across the desk, voice calm. Decline. The officer blinked. Ma'am, you earned this. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. I didn't earn it yesterday. I earned it 5 years ago, and no one wanted it then. The officer didn't know what to say. He took the papers back, almost embarrassed, and left. That was the thing about Emma. She had never fought for recognition. Recognition was noise. She lived in silence. But silence came with its own cost. That night, alone in her barracks, Emma lay on her bunk staring at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles. The base was alive outside her walls, laughter in the distance, music leaking from someone's speaker, the rhythm of normal soldiers living normal lives. She closed her eyes, but she didn't sleep. When she dreamed, she didn't see Djibouti. She saw Nuristan, Velasquez. She saw the compound burning. Declan Hoy's last stand. She smelled smoke, heard screams. She remembered the weight of dragging 2 men out through collapsing walls, Hoy's voice in her ear as he ordered her to leave him. And she remembered obeying. Her hands clenched the sheets. She had lived, he hadn't. That was the silence she carried. The base didn't know that part of the story. They only knew the salute, the tattoo, the bodies at the checkpoint. They didn't know what silence cost. By morning, the whispers had evolved. Soldiers saluted her first now, clumsy but sincere. Some offered small nods, little gestures of respect. Recruits who once laughed avoided her eyes. And yet there were still skeptics. In the mess hall, 2 corporals sat whispering just loud enough for her to hear. She staged it. Had to. Nobody takes down 5 trained operators alone. Emma didn't react. She moved through the line, collected her eggs and black coffee, and sat alone, same as before. But Colonel Marcus did react. He entered minutes later, caught the whisper, and slammed a hand on their table. His voice carried through the hall. You doubt her. You doubt what you weren't there to see. Then stand at that checkpoint alone next time, and see if you come back. The corporals dropped their eyes. The room went quiet. Emma kept eating. Recognition wasn't what she wanted, but sometimes silence needed an echo. Days passed. Investigations deepened. Intel confirmed the infiltrators were part of a rogue paramilitary strike team, probing weaknesses at U.S. bases across Africa. They hadn't expected resistance. The fact they'd been stopped here by her changed the equation. Washington called. Questions rose. Requests for Emma's reactivation grew louder. General Kavanaugh visited her in person. He found her at the checkpoint, leaning against the barricade, rifle across her lap, watching the desert breathe heat. Steele, he said, his voice quieter than usual. She turned, sir. He studied her a moment. You don't want medals, you don't want rank, but what about purpose? What about using what you still have? Her eyes stayed on the horizon. I'm using it right here. He sighed. Declan trusted you for a reason. Don't bury it behind a fence. She finally looked at him. Her voice carried a softness rare in her tone. Maybe fences are the only thing left worth protecting. The general didn't argue. He just nodded and left her to her silence. But even silence has cracks. One night Emma found herself in the base chapel. Empty pews, faint candlelight, a wooden cross casting a shadow on the floor. She sat in the back alone, hands folded, not in prayer but in memory. Her mind wandered to the men she saved in Nuristan. Were they alive now? Did they ever think of her? Did they remember her name? And then her mind drifted to Hoy. His last words, the order to leave him, the weight of obeying. She whispered into the empty chapel, voice breaking for the first time in years. I'm sorry. No one heard except herself. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, Emma was back at her post, rifle steady, eyes forward, silent as ever, but inside she carried both the ghosts and the whispers. The base no longer laughed, the base no longer mocked, the base saluted. But Emma knew the truth. Respect was loud, dignity was quiet. And dignity doesn't speak. It simply waits. Why would Washington care so much about a woman they'd buried in silence 5 years ago? The cables started arriving within 48 hours. Sealed transmissions, stamped in red, encrypted beyond the eyes of anyone but the highest offices. Requests, demands, clarifications. The Pentagon wanted answers. SOCOM wanted reports. And somewhere in Langley, whispers about Ember Two resurfaced like an old wound ripped open. Colonel Marcus was the first to feel the weight. His office filled with messages, most of them short, coded, urgent. Confirm her presence. Confirm her actions. Confirm survival of asset. Asset, not soldier, not human being. Asset. He read the words, then looked across the yard toward the southern checkpoint. There she was, same as every day. Boots planted, rifle across her chest. Eyes fixed on the horizon like the world beyond the wire was all that mattered. Emma Steele didn't look like an asset. She didn't look like someone who had changed the course of a mission no one dared write down. She looked like a ghost who'd forgotten how to vanish. That afternoon, Marcus summoned her. She entered calm as always, posture rigid, eyes unreadable. "They're asking questions," Marcus said, sliding the stack of cables across the desk. "Big questions, about you." Emma didn't touch the papers. She didn't need to. She already knew what they said. "I'm not answering them," she said softly. Marcus leaned forward. "This isn't optional, Steele. When DC calls, silence isn't." Her eyes cut into him, not defiant, not angry, just sharp. "I didn't survive Velasquez to be dragged back into their shadows. They buried us. Let them keep it buried." Marcus exhaled, rubbed his temple. "You can't hide forever, not after this. You took down 5 infiltrators alone. You don't just disappear after that." Emma's voice was steady. "Watch me." For a long moment, Marcus said nothing. Then he leaned back, studying her. "You're not just running from the government, are you?" Her silence answered for her. Because she wasn't running from them. She was running from herself. That night, Washington sent a man. The Black Hawk landed without ceremony. No flags, no welcome line. Just one man in a plain suit stepping onto the tarmac. His badge carried no branch, no seal, just the weight of authority that didn't need introduction. He found Emma at her post. "You're hard to miss these days," he said. His voice was polite, almost gentle. "Mind if I walk with you?" Emma didn't answer. She just kept her eyes on the horizon. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Velasquez was never supposed to surface. You know that, but now you've forced our hand." Emma finally turned her head just slightly. "I didn't force anything. They came. I acted, that's all." He smiled faintly. "That's never all, Ember Two." Her jaw tightened. She hated hearing the code. Ember Two wasn't who she wanted to be anymore. Ember Two was the one who had left Hoy behind. "You're needed again," the man said, softer now. "Not as a clerk, not behind a fence, as what you were trained to be. There's a team forming off the books. No names, no headlines. You belong there." Emma shook her head slowly. "I don't belong anywhere." "Emma," he said, almost like he knew her, "you can run from the world, but you can't run from what you carry. You've proven that twice now. Once in Nuristan, once here." Her eyes narrowed. "What I carry isn't for them anymore. It's mine." The man studied her, then nodded. "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." He slipped a card into her palm, plain white, no name, just a number. Then he walked away, leaving the weight of choice pressed into her hand. Emma didn't look at the card. She slid it into her pocket without a word. But that night, lying on her bunk, she pulled it back out. stared at the digits in the dim light. She thought of Hoy again. His voice, rough and steady, telling her to get out, to live, to carry the mission forward. She thought of the two men she had dragged to safety, their faces burned into memory, their breaths heavy against her shoulder as she carried them through fire. She wondered if they still remembered her, or if she was just another ghost to them too. The next morning she was back at her post, card gone, buried. But Washington wasn't done. The intel briefings intensified, rumors of more rogue strikes spread, other bases, other infiltrations. Not all had been stopped, not all had an Emma Steele standing guard. Colonel Marcus approached her again, this time with less command in his voice and more weight in his eyes. You know they won't stop until you give them what they want. Emma kept her eyes on the desert. Then they'll never stop. Steele, Marcus said, almost pleading now, you can't keep carrying this alone. She finally turned to him. Yes, I can. Silence stretched between them. Marcus saw it then, the wall she had built inside herself. Brick by brick, loss by loss. It wasn't pride keeping her in place. It was penance. That night the base chapel drew her again. Same pew, same silence, same whispered ghosts. She didn't pray, she didn't ask. She just sat, breathing the memory of fire and smoke. She whispered again, softer than before, I'm sorry. But this time the words trembled. And in that tremble for the first time was the hint of something else. Not just guilt, not just sorrow, but fear. Because deep down, Emma knew the truth. The enemy hadn't tested Camp Hawthorne by accident. They had tested her. And they weren't finished. What happens when silence collides with the sound of war? The attack at Camp Hawthorne was supposed to be an anomaly, a freak strike, a one-time breach. That's what the analysts said anyway. That's what Washington wanted to believe. But Emma Steele knew better. She stood at her post as days stretched into weeks. The desert didn't change. The heat didn't soften. The soldiers around her went back to their routines, their jokes, their arguments. But Emma saw what they didn't, the patterns shifting beneath the surface. Supply routes rerouted without explanation. Drone activity spiking along the horizon. Briefings whispered instead of announced. The silence was telling her something. Silence always did. And then one night, the silence broke. It began with a tremor, not in the ground but in the air, a faint hum like static bleeding through the sky. Emma stiffened at her post, scanning the darkness. The horizon looked empty, but her ears told a different story. She reached for her radio, dead again. Then the lights cut. Not an EMP this time, something sharper. Precision strikes against the grid. One by one, towers went dark until only the southern checkpoint still glowed faintly, powered by its buried lines. Emma exhaled once, her eyes narrowed. They were back. But this time not 4 men, not 5 more. Shadows moved across the sand, spreading in formation. A dozen, maybe more, black-clad, fast, deliberate. They weren't probing anymore. They were coming to finish what they started. Emma raised her rifle. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She could fire. She could drop 2, maybe 3 before the wave reached her, but even she wasn't enough for this. Not alone. She tapped the silent alarm again. Nothing. Her jaw clenched. They knew. They learned from last time. For a moment she considered standing her ground anyway, to fight until the sand swallowed her, to let the silence end here. But another voice echoed inside her, Hoy's voice, his last order, get out, carry it forward. Emma pulled back, not in retreat, in movement. She slipped into the shadows, low and silent, vanishing into the base before the intruders reached her position. By the time they breached the southern fence, Checkpoint Echo was empty. But Emma was already moving. She cut through the barracks row, weaving between sleeping quarters, scanning the intruders' path. They weren't random. They weren't reckless. They moved with precision, heading straight for the command center, straight for Marcus. Emma's breath stayed slow, her steps deliberate. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. She reached the armory first. Two guards stood outside, startled by the blackout, weapons half ready. Emma didn't waste time. "Wake them," she snapped. "Now, full mobilization." They blinked at her, confused. "Do it," she hissed, voice sharper than steel. Something in her tone cut through doubt. They obeyed. Within minutes, alarms began to wail. Soldiers spilled from bunks, confused, shouting. Lights flickered back online as backup generators roared awake. The base stirred to life, too late for perfect order, but enough to resist. And in the middle of it all, Emma was already gone. She tracked the intruders across the compound, moving faster than the chaos around her. She knew their rhythm, their tactics. She fought shadows like them before. She caught the first one slipping through the motor pool. A quick chokehold, silent, clean. She dragged his body into the shadows, took his suppressed sidearm, and kept moving. Two more near the comms tower. She waited, counted. One turned, two shots, precise. Both dropped before they even knew she was there. But numbers were against her. For every one she cut down, more pushed forward. And the chaos of the base meant soldiers were scattering without clear direction. That's when she saw him. Colonel Marcus, stepping out of the command center, pistol drawn, shouting orders. He hadn't seen the figure creeping behind him, rifle raised, sights locked on his back. Emma's body moved before her mind did. She sprinted low, firing once. The intruder dropped at Marcus's heels. Marcus spun, gun raised, then froze when he saw her. "Steal," he started. "Inside," she snapped. "Now." He hesitated only a second, then obeyed. For the first time in years, Emma was giving orders again. The firefight grew louder. Tracer rounds cut through the night. Soldiers scrambled into positions. But Emma knew the truth. The intruders weren't here for chaos alone. They had a target, a reason. And when she saw the way they funneled, the way they ignored easier kills to push deeper into the compound, she understood. They weren't after Marcus. They were after her. Her stomach clenched. The truth she hadn't spoken to anyone, the truth she whispered only to herself in the chapel, burned in her chest. They weren't testing the base. They were testing her. A shadow cut across her vision. Another intruder lunged from the side. She spun, slammed his arm against the wall, twisted until bone cracked, then drove the stolen sidearm into his chest. Quick, brutal, efficient. But her breath was heavier now, her pulse faster. She wasn't 23 anymore. She was Ember Two, the ghost who never missed. She was Emma Steele, the woman who had chosen silence over war, and silence was breaking. Marcus's voice crackled behind her, loud over the chaos. "We need to regroup, fall back to the central yard." Emma didn't answer. She couldn't. Because another memory surged forward, Nuristan again. The compound, the fire, Hoy's face lit by flames, his voice calm even as death closed in. "Carry it forward, Ember Two. Carry it forward." Her throat tightened. For years she thought she had been running from that order, burying it behind a desk, a checkpoint, a pair of polished boots no one noticed. But maybe she hadn't been running at all. Maybe she'd been waiting. Her rifle rose again. Her finger tightened. And for the first time in 5 years, Emma Steele didn't feel like a clerk or a ghost or a forgotten name buried in a vault. She felt like what she had always been trained to be. A soldier. And the silence broke with the sound of her gun. What would you do if the very thing you ran from came hunting for you? The battle at Camp Hawthorne raged louder than the desert had ever heard. Machine guns cut the night into jagged bursts of fire. Shouts tangled with screams. Spotlights swept across shadows, catching glimpses of black-clad intruders weaving between buildings. But Emma Steele wasn't in the yard, wasn't with the soldiers regrouping under Marcus's command. She moved deeper into the dark veins of the base, tracking the rhythm no one else could hear. Because the intruders weren't scattering, they were converging, and Emma knew what that meant. She followed their line, her breath steady but her chest tight. her boots pressed against sand and steel, every step deliberate. She passed bodies, some intruders, some of her own, faces pale under the floodlights. She didn't look away, but she didn't slow either. Her rifle led her toward the fuel depot, toward the one place that could cripple the base if destroyed. But that wasn't their goal. Emma knew. The depot was bait, a diversion. She slipped through the shadows, ears sharp, eyes narrowed. Then she saw him. Tall, broad, moving with the kind of command that didn't need words. The others orbited him like gravity. His mask was black, his movements precise. He didn't glance around nervously like his men, he moved as if he owned the night. Emma froze, not from fear, from recognition. The way he walked, the way his hand adjusted his rifle, the tilt of his head, sharp and deliberate. Memory slammed into her chest. Velasquez. She remembered a figure like that. A man who had disappeared into smoke the night the compound burned. A man whose face she never saw, but whose presence pressed against the chaos like a blade at her throat. Could it be him? Her jaw clenched. She lowered her rifle, but her finger trembled against the trigger. She wasn't ready to know, not yet. The leader signaled his men. They fanned outward, forming a perimeter, scanning the shadows. One of them moved dangerously close to her position. Emma sank deeper against the wall, heartbeat steady, lungs tight. She could kill him now, silence him before he saw her, but the leader would know. The others would collapse in. And Emma understood something terrible. They weren't hunting the base, they were hunting her. Because one of them murmured through a comm she almost didn't catch, "Locate Ember Two." The sound froze her blood. She had been right all along. This wasn't about a base in Djibouti. This wasn't about fuel or chaos. This was about her tattoo, her code, her existence. Emma's mind spun. She wanted to vanish, to slip back into the silence she'd lived in, to disappear before the weight crushed her. But then Hoy's voice again, echoing across years and fire. "Carry it forward, Ember Two. Don't stop until it means something." Her breath hitched. She blinked once, steady, calm, then she moved. Her shot dropped the closest intruder before he even registered her. A clean head snap, body falling silent into sand. Chaos erupted instantly. The others turned, shouting, scattering. The leader barked something sharp in a language she didn't catch. Their formation shifted, too quick, too professional. Emma darted between shadows, her rifle spitting controlled bursts. Another man fell, then another. She was a ghost again, unseen, striking from angles they couldn't pin down. But ghosts don't last forever. A round clipped her shoulder, spinning her against a wall. Pain burned through muscle, hot and sharp, but she bit it down. She forced herself to breathe steady, eyes scanning, ears tuned. The leader advanced, slow, calm, deliberate. Ember Two, his voice called, low and accented through the night. Not mocking, not cruel, reverent. Emma stiffened. He knew her code, her past. He wasn't guessing, he was certain. 5 years I've waited, he continued. 5 years they buried you, and yet here you stand. Her rifle rose. Her voice was steady, though her chest screamed. Who are you? The leader chuckled softly, as if the question itself was naive. The one who watched you leave Hoy behind. The words sliced deeper than any bullet. Her stomach clenched. Her vision blurred for a second, not from blood, but from memory. Hoy's face, Hoy's command, "Go, carry it forward." Her voice cracked just slightly. "You weren't there." "I was everywhere," he said, "and now I am here for you." The intruders regrouped behind him, tightening their circle. Emma's options shrank. Her shoulder ached. Her breath grew heavier. She could retreat, slip away like before, vanish into silence, let Marcus and the others clean up the chaos. Or she could step into it, step back into Ember Two. Her hand tightened on the rifle. Her teeth ground against the pain. "I left him because he ordered me to," she said, voice trembling with fury and grief. "And I carry that order still." Then she fired. The shot cracked through the night, hitting the leader's mask, spinning him sideways. He fell to a knee, blood dark against black cloth. His men roared, unleashing fire. Emma Dove rolling behind cover, rounds shredding the wall where she'd stood. She winced, her shoulders screaming, but her mind was clear now. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't just Emma Steele, the clerk with the butterfly tattoo. She was Ember Two. And tonight, the silence was hers to break. What does it mean to stand when no one else will? The firefight tore through Camp Hawthorne like a storm. Tracers carved the dark. Concrete split. Voices shouted commands lost in the roar of automatic fire. Soldiers scrambled across open ground, some stumbling, some rising again. The base was chaos, fractured, bleeding, afraid. And in the middle of it, Emma Steele moved. Her shoulder burned, her lungs pulled sharp breaths, but her steps were steady. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. The leader staggered through the smoke, mask cracked from her shot, blood dark against his collar. He pressed a hand to his wound but didn't fall. He looked back at her, eyes burning through the chaos, and in them she saw something that rattled her more than hate. Recognition. "You should have stayed dead," he growled. Emma's rifle rose, her body trembling but controlled. "I tried," she whispered. Then the world collapsed again. His men surged forward, a dozen shadows cutting toward her. Emma dropped 3 in quick succession before diving behind a burning jeep. Bullets tore metal and glass. Sparks rained down. Her breath quickened, her heart hammered, but her mind was sharp. Velasquez had taught her this: to survive the impossible, you don't fight the battle, you bend it. She scanned fast, saw the fuel line snaking along the ground toward the depot, saw the flicker of a torn wire sparking inches from spilled gasoline. Her mind raced. One shot, one spark. It would end them and her. Her finger hovered on the trigger. But then another voice cut through the fire. Colonel Marcus. He was shouting from across the yard, rallying soldiers into position. They fired from rooftops now, from alleys, pushing the intruders back inch by inch. Emma froze. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. Her trigger finger eased off the spark. She rose instead, exposing herself, firing clean into the night. 1, 2, 3, every shot precise, every breath measured. She wasn't ending this in silence. She was carrying it forward. The leader charged through the smoke. His rifle barked fire, forcing her back. He closed the distance fast, too fast. Her rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, drew her knife. The clash was brutal, close, raw. His strength pressed her back, knife flashing. She blocked with her forearm, pain searing. He slammed her into the jeep, steel biting into her spine. "You can't escape what you are," he hissed, driving the blade closer. Emma's breath hitched, her muscles trembled, his weight crushed against her. For a second she faltered. Then Hoy's voice surged in her chest, not as a ghost but as a command still alive. "Carry it forward." She twisted hard, pain lancing through her shoulder, and drove her knife into his side. Once, twice, his breath hitched, his body convulsed. She pushed him back, his eyes wide in disbelief. "You're right," she said, her voice calm, steady, final. "I can't escape what I am." He fell to the sand, eyes still burning until they went cold. The silence after was heavier than the gunfire. His men faltered. Without command, they broke, scattered into the night. The remaining soldiers of Camp Hawthorne cut them down or drove them out beyond the wire. And then slowly the chaos ebbed. The base stood, bloodied, scarred, but alive. Emma collapsed to one knee, breath ragged, knife still in her grip. Marcus reached her first, hand outstretched. For a second she considered refusing, staying in her silence. But then she took it. He pulled her up, their eyes locked. No words passed, they didn't need to. By dawn the smoke thinned. The base was quiet again. Soldiers moved slowly, carrying bodies, patching wounds, sweeping debris. The desert sun rose indifferent over the carnage. Emma returned to her post at Checkpoint Echo, Same place, same rifle, same silence. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. When recruits passed, they saluted, not out of fear, not out of legend, but out of understanding. Because they had seen it now. They had seen her carry it forward. In the days that followed, Washington sent new cables, demands, questions, medals pressed into her hand again. She refused them all. She wasn't there for medals. She wasn't there for noise. She was there for the silence that came before dawn, for the space between breaths when everything hung on one choice, one trigger, one voice that said, "Stand." And though she never spoke of it, those who served beside her would remember. Not the tattoo, not the file, not even the name Ember Two. They would remember the woman who had been invisible until the night she saved them all. And in years to come, when recruits sat whispering over coffee, someone would always say the same thing. She didn't need to prove anything, she just stood. And if anyone asked what that meant, the answer would come soft, almost reverent. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.